welcome to the People Are People podcast, life lessons learned in real time, where we touch on the crazy realities of dealing with human behavior in the workplace. In 2022, I am presenting a series that I simply call the New Manager series, where we talk about and will focus on a variety of topics every manager needs to know to be successful during and beyond their first year of management. Being a manager is not always a pretty job. It comes with highs and lows that you must prepare yourself to navigate. So in this episode, we are going to be discussing innovation without pressure. I don't know about you, but I often find myself falling into the trap of not being proactive in my innovation. And what do I mean by that? Sometimes I think, it's the problems that can sometimes motivate us to become innovative. So, let's think about the term innovation itself. Innovation basically means, that you're deploying a brand new idea, method, or device. We often think of the term innovation as innovating or developing, creating new things to yield positive results, right? And so oftentimes, it's problems that will inspire us to be innovative. But did you know there are some things that you could do to be proactive in some of your innovation? And I think it's important that we, as managers, really think through that process from time to time. I think for me, while yes, I come up with amazing solutions when I'm under pressure and need to make a quick decision, I actually come up with some of my best innovative ideas when I'm not under pressure and when I have time to really evaluate the detail that's before me. So in this podcast episode, I'm really going to dive into helping managers find their path to being proactive with their innovation, kind of give them some ideas of things that they can look at to inspire them. I'm going to talk a little bit about, establishing a foundation to help you with, sustaining ways to be innovative. I'm going to talk a little bit about the mad scientist in the lab versus being a collaborator in your innovation. And, along the way, we'll dive into different types of innovation. I think it's really important to talk about, some of what the industry is saying are different examples of innovation. And hopefully it'll give you some ideas as well for next steps that you can take to be proactive in your innovation. So I want to start by talking more about the different types of innovation first. And I came across an article on hbr.org in which they were talking about 4 different types of innovation that I think, everyone should familiarize themselves with. I think that they really help to define the different types of problems we solve. And I think also aligns well with what I wanted to talk about today and being proactive. So the first type of innovation identified by Harvard Business Review is sustaining innovation. And sustaining innovation basically focuses on us looking at ways to get better at what it is we do. So if you think about, if you're looking at your day-to-day work processes, the wash, rinse, and repeat activities that you do, this is where you get to really take a look at, is there a way to get better at what it is you do? Whether it's serving your internal customers or serving external customers, partnering with your team, delivering a particular product. Is there an opportunity for you to identify some of the problems, again, when you're not in a reactionary mode, and look for ways to deploy new strategies? For example, let's say you are a team who receives requests for services from one of your internal business partners, or it could be that, customers submit service requests. Is the process that's in place sustainable, or is it a process that could be improved? Are there inefficiencies? Maybe there's new technology out there now that you might consider implementing to bring about access to additional services, or, improving the workflow as it relates to how it is your team navigates different activities. These are examples of ways that you can look for, sustaining innovation. The next type is breakthrough innovation. So breakthrough innovation basically entails having a well-defined problem that is difficult to solve. And so, the article gives this interesting example that focuses on an individual who had a very challenging, difficult problem to solve, and he had come up with a solution that was maybe a bit grandiose, let's say. And so, while it was an idea, it actually, that was a little bit grandiose, let me add, it still gave some aspect of a solution. And so he was able to take it to someone else, right, that was a little more skilled in that category to help solve for the problem itself. So, this basically entailed him coming up with an unconventional idea, but taking it to an expert who could further, assist him in solving the problem and provide a more realistic solution. So, basically in a nutshell, how do you actually just look at identifying. So in a nutshell, you have this opportunity, to be innovative by looking at maybe some of your more complex problems and coming up with solutions to resolve those. And again, you don't have to do it on your own, right? This is where you get to actually lean on others to help you solve for X. The next type of innovation the article speaks on is disruptive innovation. So basically, it challenges us to examine innovating our business model rather than the service or the product. So basically, it also dives into being careful not to get good at the things people want or need less and less. And I thought this was an interesting concept because I think we can also find ourselves as managers getting wrapped around the axle at perfecting processes. Now, I know in the first example that I gave, or first type of innovation that I spoke on, I talked about, looking for ways to sustain innovation. But this third type of innovation actually encourages us to look for ways to really think outside of the box and ensure that you're advancing your model. So, for example, if we think about the iPod, for those of us who have been around for some time, you might remember when we used to have these little musical devices or little electronic devices which we could download music. Right? This was before the apps on the phones and such, where you could download music. You actually had to buy a device that allowed you to download the music and stream it independent of a computer. And these things were just awesome, right? They were portable, they were small, you could take them to the gym as part of your workout. And if we look at where we are now, there are smartphones with apps for that, right? That you can download, stream your music, whatever you choose to do, and you no longer need an iPod. So this third type of innovation basically challenges us to imagine adjusting or changing our business model, to think beyond today, not to get wrapped up around the axle. And so I think it's okay, as I said before, that you're looking at ways to get better at what it is you do, but you should also be looking ahead as it relates to, hey, what would the future look like? If I had my say so, how would we do things differently? Or what services would we offer that are different but still meets the need of our customers? And then finally, the fourth type of innovation that the Harvard Business Review article touches on is basic research. And so this basically entails discovering a new phenomenon. This means you really diving into industry trends, keeping up with those trends, and not being afraid to try new things. So that's just a little bit about the 4 types of innovation, that this article touched on. I really wanted to integrate that into this discussion because hopefully it gives you something to think about, right? That you're not just siloed into being innovative when there's a single type of problem. There's multiple ways that you can be innovative. So let's talk a little bit about finding your path to proactivity, right? How do you get proactive in being innovative? Well, I think one of the best places you can start is with your policies or documented expectations, communication that you have in place for your team, as relates to processes and workflows. Are those things sustainable? Is there a better way that you could do it and still meet the needs of your business partners or your associates, the frontline folks that report to you? When we look at standard training for the team, right? Figuring out whether or not that training is the most effective version or the right version for the team. Unfortunately, as managers, sometimes we give our employees a lot of information, but what do they really need to know to be effective in their job? And is there an innovative way to deliver that information to them? You can also look at metrics. We've talked a lot about metrics in our podcast this year. And, I've delved into performance metrics, right? Productivity metrics, using that information to tell you a story, not just to tell others a story, but using that information to help you figure out where you have opportunity to be innovative is extremely possible. And as I said, could be very effective in, motivating you to do something differently. And then consistent day-to-day behaviors. If you're finding that there's a pattern in things that are occurring, that maybe don't work in your best interest or the interest of your team, you can use that information to figure out or to identify that there's an opportunity for innovation. Another thing for you to consider is establishing a foundation for, an ongoing foundation for helping you to consistently be innovative. And so when we look at, strengths and weaknesses, for example, we've talked about, when we're managing our employees, that we want to focus on their strengths, right? And help them get better at what it is they do. Doesn't mean that we ignore the weaknesses, but we focus on their strengths. Well, in this instance, you want to target both, honestly, because as a mid-level manager, when you're looking at your unit internally and again, the people you serve and how well you're serving them, weaknesses are actually a gap, basically. And so you always want to be sure to address the gaps that are leading to poor outcomes. So again, use your metrics, right? Listen to the story that they're telling you as it relates to steps and actions you need to take to again, become innovative, solve for that problem. Industry trends are another fantastic way to help prompt you to be innovative, right? So you want to make sure that you're keeping up with, relevant groups out there, that you're networking. Social media, as much flack as it catches, is actually a great source of a lot of different professionals who are immersed in the area that you work in. You can use a lot of the information out there to inspire you to be innovative. Obviously you're not going to necessarily plagiarize, I should say, anything that somebody is doing, but it may inspire you, right, to do something differently, and differently in a way that enhances the services that you provide. Industry and trade publications are a great way to keep up as well with industry trends. I know once we leave college, sometimes we are very slow to pick up anything that has to do with a journal, particularly once you get your master's. Let me tell you, the last thing you feel like doing is reading more and more journals, but I highly encourage you to do so, to get a sense of what are the competitors doing, what are the people doing that are in your industry, And is it something that you could replicate or implement in a way that is that much more effective and is tailored to the services that you provide? And then finally, look for conferences. Again, a great way to network and also an excellent way to get new information. Now, I've already highlighted this early on, but keep an eye out for gaps in performance, inefficiencies, trending data. Again, you don't want to necessarily have to respond to it once it lands in your email box. That's more reactionary. But if you're seeing trends and some of the feedback that you're getting, or you're seeing a trend in the performance of your team, again, this is a great way to identify opportunities for innovation. Now, finally, the last thing you're going to want to consider is whether or not you're going to be the mad scientist in the lab coming up with all these innovative ideas, or if you're going to want to collaborate with others on your team, perhaps your peers. Be realistic about whatever approach you're going to take. If you know that your team is overwhelmed with their day-to-day tasks, it may be that you cannot necessarily pull them in, right, to support you in anything that you're doing. That's not to say that you're not going to communicate with them about what you're doing, but it may not be a good idea to necessarily pull them in to your mad scientist lab to help you solve for X. But if you have a team that maybe has some downtime, or you have people who they don't care if they have to work off the side of their desk, pull them in, have them help you come up with some innovative solutions to whatever it is you're encountering. Finally, you'll want to think about how you're going to roll out this innovation. Is it going to be an iterative release, or are you going to roll out a big, pretty package? Definitely always keep that in the back of your mind as you're coming up with your solution. Perhaps you're going to test your solution or innovative idea somewhere. If so, again, make sure you plan for that accordingly. That brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you for listening. If you liked the podcast, please do not forget to like this podcast, share it with others. I am a small podcaster and a very large CO podcaster, so anything that you can do to help me grow is always appreciated. I want to take a moment to encourage you not to fear innovation and to really try to step out there and make a difference in what it is you do. Stay safe, and I'll catch you in the next podcast.